Hi, everybody. Hey, we're just going to wait 2 or 3 minutes for some latecomers to join the meeting, and then we'll get rolling. Yeah, we may get some hearing, constantly hearing dings of people joining, but let me just kind of start out by introducing myself. My name's Jim Jensen. I'm the Formulator Business Segment Manager for Nufarm, which means that half of my business is basically working in the pro side of the market with Nufarm AIs that go on fertilizer or carriers, and the other half of my business is going through distribution to retail, so big box stores as well as independent garden centers. Um, Basically, want to introduce you to the product today. Jason Fossey will will provide kind of the insight on all the research that we've done over the years. But I kind of want to start out by just saying how long we've been working on this project. So we started back in 2017, and probably most of you are familiar with Broadstar or SureGuard as our options for flumioxazin. And back in long before 2017, we started to think about the unique performance aspects of flumioxazin and whether it could be used on fertilizer or a carrier. But obviously, flumioxazin, for those of you who don't know, if you spray it over the top of actively growing turf, you're going to get some phyto. That phyto will basically outgrow in a fairly short period of time, but it's not something that that you thought of in terms of actively growing turf. It was more of a bed or nursery greenhouse type product, landscape bed product. But the concept started back before 2017 to say, hey, what was the safety level that we could achieve if we put it onto a granule? And what size granule and what kind of rate? So Jason and his team, Jason is the director of our technical services department, and he's actually, you could call him the father of flumioxazin. He's been working with flumioxazin for, I think, coming on to 30 years now. He did his PhD dissertation on flumi, so there's no better expert on what to expect from flumioxazin. And we got our registration for this product on fertilizer back actually in 2022. And its easy fit is in warm season grasses as an alternative to Ronstar. Most of you know, at least those of you who work in the warm season areas, Ronstar has had a significant change to their label, which makes it difficult to use on a golf course, and obviously doesn't have a residential turf label. So, that's the low-hanging fruit of the opportunity. But as we worked on the product and Jason did his work, we were also doing a lot of work on safety levels and performance characteristics in cool season turf. And Jason will go into that kind of detail. So we started obviously in 22, getting the product out kind of slowly, just like Ronstar. For those of you who are old enough to remember the introduction of Ronstar to the market, Ronstar had its challenges early on, and so like so many things, we had to learn with Ronstar how to use it correctly, and we wanted to do the same thing, mainly because of that potential for phyto in a spray situation. But over the years, we proved significant safety, and we were doing the same thing in cool season grasses. We do have our residential turf part of the label. So we have customers currently that are seeing how it fits into cool season grasses, and of course warm season as well. And there's some distinct characteristics where by no means are we talking about replacing a standard pre-emergent program with a prodiamine or dithiopyr, but you'll see as Jason goes through the research where this product fits to augment or support the current pre-emergent program that you would get with those standard products. So with that, I think we still have some latecomers, but they haven't missed any of the real meat of the presentation. So I'll introduce Jason, and again, he's the director of our technical services department, and pretty much the father of flumioxazin. So Jason, with that, I'll let you take it away, okay?
Yeah, well, thank you, Jim, and really appreciate that. And I think I have one more year. I think I'm 29 years of working with flumioxazin right now. So, like you said, a lot of experience, and look forward to over the next few minutes really sharing some of that experience. It's certainly a unique molecule. We're really just today going to go through some of the work with StayGuard, really from the beginning to where we're at today, and really kind of roll that into the recommendations so you can kind of understand where we're coming from and what we're seeing in the field, and then really spend some time on the opportunities that we have in landscape ornamental beds as well as cool season grasses like you mentioned. So kind of a well-rounded hopefully presentation today, and certainly if you have any questions, there is a Q&A that we'll be having. We're planning on having plenty of time at the end, so if you have some questions, feel free to enter those, and we'll make sure that we get to your questions. Like I said, I'm just going to kind of start here with the research and development and the overview of StayGuard. Like Jim was saying, it's really based on flumioxazin, and just to take a very, real basic level of what we're talking about as far as a herbicide here, it is a rather unique group 14 PPO herbicide that has both pre-emergence and post-emergence activity. And like most of our pre-emergence, right, we need to kind of start with a nice uniform layer. Those weeds are going to germinate. They're going to then come in contact with that herbicide. And then once they're exposed to sunlight, that's when you're going to see the herbicidal activity. So this is not a root inhibiting herbicide at all. It's nice that way, that it's not going to impact your turf or your ornamentals in any way as far as the rooting effects. And it's also a herbicide that's not translocated, so it can come in contact with a root. So it can come in contact with plants in landscape beds when it's on the soil and not have to worry about being taken up by the roots and having an effect in that manner. It also binds really tightly to soil, so for the most part, where we see where it's applied and watered in, it will stay there, and it's not volatile, so it doesn't vaporize and really cause activity. But a unique characteristic that does go with this, though, is you do see the ability to what I call reach back, or small weeds that are emerged at application that kind of can have the same process. Even though they've germinated, they can still come in contact with that herbicide, get exposed to sunlight, and still have efficacy or the ability to still control them. So it is a rather unique herbicide in that manner. Like Jim was saying, SureGuard's been on the market for 24 years now. Broadstar is a true granular herbicide. A lot of different settings between landscapes and dormant turf and even aquatics. So again, a herbicide we're very familiar with, and we really look forward to bringing this for use on fertilizer for all these settings as well. And we've known this for years, that really with SureGuard, when it was applied to dormant Bermuda grass, say in November, this is in Alabama, back in 2011, a nice overview of some research that when you apply SureGuard, you can see this overall where really nice control here of Poa annua for 4 months. So, it was unique chemistry, but like Jim was saying, it is something that you just couldn't apply to green actively growing turf. It really always had that major limitation. So, we've kind of changed that. Some of the other things, though, that we found out with SureGuard, really early, and this is just some work that was done at the golf course at Arizona State University, where what we're looking at here is a ryegrass fairway, the nice green areas, the ryegrass fairway, and how close could you get with a product like flumioxazin? In this case, in SureGuard, when this Bermuda grass was dormant, and you can see a nice hillside here. Do we have to worry about this running into and causing some injury to that ryegrass? We've done this for years, so we know where this product is one that you can get really close to these areas and not have to worry so much, like a lot of other herbicides, especially with different modes of action, where you see running of herbicides. This is a product that overall will stay bound to where it's at. And then you can see in this area up here where all the annual bluegrass, it controlled it both post-emergence and pre-emergence for a long period of time here. So again, getting a good, nice feeling what you could get with flumioxazin when it was used in turf. The nice thing about it too has been the use rate. If you look at the low and high use rate for StayGuard, it's 200 pounds or 300 pounds. And that's the exact same amount of active ingredients that we'd find with SureGuard as a sprayable formulation at 8 to 12 fluid ounces for SureGuard EZ or SureGuard SC, either one of those formulations. So again, something that we can really build on. And just like we were saying with Broadstar, here's a true granular. It only has one use rate. It's 150 pounds per acre, and that is again equivalent to our 300 pounds of StayGuard. So again, use rates that we're really familiar with. We know what these products can all do when they're applied in this certainly in this use rate range. And when you really then start to compare SureGuard compared to Ronstar, again, this is what Jim talked about, especially when we focus our uses in warm season turf. These both have the same mode of action. You can see here, though, they are in different classes. One of the more interesting things to me is, that flumioxazin was developed 20 years later. So it is newer chemistry. And so what do we mean by newer chemistry in a different class is that a lot of times we see here that it's more active. So instead of 2 to 4 pounds that you see with Ronstar to get adequate weed control, we're down at 0.2 to 0.4. So again, 10 times more active. So you need less active ingredients to still maintain that high level of weed control. So we can really kind of roll that into what we know with SureGuard and Broadstar applications and kind of build on that. And like Jim said, one of the other big differences that you see here are these landscape and residential uses. We've always had that with Broadstar and SureGuard. We see that again with StayGuard. So again, something that we can build on with this product. This is a protocol, a research protocol that I wanted to point out when we started a lot of our turf evaluations. We're looking at Ronstar here compared to 3 different StayGuards, a couple of different SGNs like Jim talked about. We looked at a 220 versus a 150 and even a sulfur-coated 220 just to see if there were some differences initially and see how these products can compare. And really, when we were doing a lot of our research, this was pretty much what the data would look like. Again, a June application to 419 Bermuda grass, and we're looking here at injury, and what you see is nothing. There was nothing with Ronstar. There was nothing with any of these different formulations of StayGuard. So overall, just a really good tolerance on actively growing grass. If it was warm season, cool season, I'll show that. But certainly here with a June application at NC State, no response, and that really is what we saw consistently across our trials. But when we switch gears a little bit and look into the efficacy, again, kind of building on background and what we've done in this exact same protocol, the only thing different here is that we have also included dithiopyr. So we looked at dimension at 2 pints, compared that to Ronstar and these different SureGuard formulations, and you can see this is at 8 weeks here. And really what I wanted to focus on is this 12 weeks or 3 months after that application. And the box here, what I've shown is really no difference. Jim kind of mentioned this, but what we've seen in our research consistently is that really there's no StayGuard when it's on a fertilizer, if it's on a smaller prill or if it's on a larger prill. A lot of times we like to see it even just on a larger prill. It'll drop through that foliage, provide this really good weed control, especially because we're at that use rate of 200 to 300 pounds where we get really nice coverage. So again, making that nice uniform coverage is key. But you can see here in this trial, the dithiopyr or dimension did certainly break down by 3 months after that application for goosegrass control, whereas our other products were lasting a longer period of time. So a good way to substitute, if you want to look at that for goosegrass control, is our StayGuard versus Ronstar. But one of the things that you'll start to see some real differences are some of the other weeds. First one being annual bluegrass. This is some nice work that was done at Virginia Tech. But the first 2 bars here, we're looking at control with Ronstar versus the control provided 200 and 300 pounds of StayGuard. So again, a larger bar here, we're looking at more like 80 to 90% control. Again, this is a November and even a December rating from a September application. So again, several months after that application, getting nice long residual control. And again, this is something that you don't usually think of Ronstar for, but we've seen consistently with StayGuard is this POA control that you can also get into it in addition to some of the crabgrass and as well as the goosegrass control. So when you start to look and combine all these annual grasses, and this is just a nice representative data set, you'll see there's some variability. That's the first thing I like to point out to people is that the length of control, and this is length of really acceptable, long-lasting control, does have some variability here, but when you look at the average, it turns out to be 14 weeks, and that's where my recommendation a lot of times of 3 months or 12 weeks. That to me just gives you really consistent control if it's goosegrass, POA, crabgrass, foxtails, really our annual grasses across the board, a lot of different locations. Again, looking at consistency here, and that's what we find with StayGuard, that we have that consistent when we look at 3 months of control. Again, though, one of the differences, again, would be some of this broadleaf activity that you would see between Ronstar and StayGuard. Again, looking here at 7 days, and this is really quick. So right after that application, this is 200 and 300 pounds with StayGuard, where we're up here in 50, 60, 70% control with StayGuard just a week after an application on fertilizer. So again, kind of that reach back that I was talking about earlier, you see that same thing when it's applied on a fertilizer. So it can fall through that canopy, but still have contact with some of these small weeds and have really good control. And you can see even 3 months after that, where the StayGuard's still kind of holding 50, 60% control. It's not going to replace all of your broadleaf applications, but certainly a supplement or something different as far as managing weeds. It's a really unique aspect of StayGuard that brings some uniqueness. And, you know, it's not only for white clover and some of the other weeds, but something like spotted spurge that I continually hear more problems with. This is some work that we did down in Florida here in 24, where they made 2 applications, both May and June, of all these treatments, and all of them are sprayable treatments except for one, the StayGuard, which is the orange line up here. And we're looking at percent control over time. So you want a really nice high bar. And it really, these products all kind of fell into 3 different tiers. The top tier of best performing products were StayGuard, as well as Southpaw plus Changeup. So multiple modes of action there mixed together as a sprayable formulation worked really well, which isn't surprising. Our second tier of products of just Changeup or Southpaw applied alone. So when you put those 2 together, it looked better. But then the tier 3 were Celsius Extra. So again, you can see some of the differences here. And StayGuard, even when it's applied on a fertilizer carrier, really holding its own with these applications. So again, another management opportunity I think that you see with StayGuard. And this is just a quick tweet that was put out there on July 3rd from Dr. McElroy down at Auburn, right? If you look at it, I mean, StayGuard, he mentioned here is the untreated is on the right here, where you see a number of weeds. This is the StayGuard side here in the blue. But, you know, his comment, nearly 100% post control from a granular application, right? And that was what he was talking about with StayGuard, and as well as the crabgrass and doveweed control. So again, very unique product as far as the activity that it provided on sedges. And that's what he was talking about as far as the sedge control here, as well as doveweed and crabgrass activity with StayGuard. So, Jim, maybe you can jump in and make some comments about some of the things we've been hearing.
Yeah, absolutely. Good time to break. We're a little bit more than halfway through the presentation, but I failed to remind everybody at the beginning that I think along your top toolbar, you'll see a question Q&A opportunity. So if you have questions as we go through this, please type them in. And Jason, we have about 15 minutes at the end where we have time to address some of those questions. But, you know, I want to emphasize that particularly in cool season, you know, this isn't about, as I said before, not about replacing a dithiopyr or prodiamine, but the customers that have started to work with this in cool season grasses see this as a kind of an augmentation in terms of supporting the crabgrass control program, which their pre-emergent is really focused on, really helping with the broadleaf weed control that you get early in the spring, to the point where it really could take that pressure off of the timing and perhaps the cost of that early season spray program. And StayGuard gives you that opportunity to do a split app. So in terms of addressing the longevity issue, you can sure add an additional application and go up to 600 pounds per year. In warm season, the advantages are obvious as a replacement for Ronstar, since it's so difficult to use now with the limitations. But I think Jason's outlined, in terms of the spectrum, and most people were focused on the POA control in the early season. So a lot of different aspects to the product. And I think that, when I look at product development over my 40 plus years in the business, I think about, okay, what's the rest of the story? What are the edges of the envelope in terms of how to use this product and how not to? And when you think about flumioxazin having that potential as a sprayable to show phyto, we wanted to test that. And so Jason has done work on mini granule sizes, like 150s or so, thinking that, that would increase the odds of it sticking onto the turf and showing some phyto. And he's done that, and without any kind of observed phyto. Also, doubling up the rate. Mistakes will happen. We all know that. So we did quite a bit of research on 2x rates, and again, showing, no risk of phyto. And the only situation, remember, flumioxazin is an aquatic herbicide. So really the only situations that we've come across since getting our registration in 22 is you want to make sure that you're not applying it to standing water, saturated areas where it's really going to be hyperactive. So that's one cautionary note, and maybe Jason can elaborate on that. And the other situation is just the quality of the fertilizer. If you had a really dusty blend, maybe a really poor limestone component or something like that, that dust is going to create a problem when it lands on the leaf surface. And Jason has some specific recommendations for irrigating the product in to kind of reduce that risk. But again, we've done some extensive research, that being, the safety concern and where were the edges of the envelope. So, the other part I'll say, just to give Jason a bit of a break here, is this is widely available now in terms of what formulators have access to the product. The southern markets have worked with it for a longer period of time, but we're definitely getting people started in cool season grasses and landscape bed applications on fertilizer. So I don't think you're going to find too many. All the big formulators have access to this product. So with that, Jason, I don't know if you want to continue or comment.
Yeah, no, I think some great comments, Jim. And it really kind of takes me into one of the things I wanted to talk about next, right, is pushing that envelope, right? And really knowing where the product fits and where it doesn't. I've shown data, everything I've shown to this point was really focused, comparative to Ronstar in warm season turf, where it matches up really well, right? But the one area that I do want to talk, even especially in these warm season turf where they might do some overseeding with some ryegrass, is that, right, this is a product that has both pre-emergence and post-emergence activity, and it is something that you have to be careful on that established ryegrass. If it's an application right prior to it or right after. And really the nice thing about it is that you can still make an application, say in May and in June. It has nice long residual control with StayGuard. But it isn't to the point to where you can't do some overseeding in the fall. It still opens up that window. But my concern, or what I want to really even just kind of point out, is really kind of watch that 8 weeks around seeding. So really a month plus before that and right after that, your turf, being ryegrass, really has to be established or well established before making an application of StayGuard. So again, if you're doing some overseeding and ryegrass, be really cautious with this product. Again, it has a lot of activity, like Jim says, especially if you were to get a big, wet, heavy rain, it turns off a little cool, you make a StayGuard application and very juvenile turf, you can understand that's not necessarily the ideal situation for this herbicide. So I will point that out and caution with you on that. But again, what we have seen, especially on the Bermuda grass fits with this, is really it's a plug and play. I try to keep it really simple for people. If you're very comfortable and have consistently been using Ronstar, right, this is the true alternative. Build that program around that, right? You never was really looking at a Ronstar application as a single application and doing everything, right? You were using other active ingredients, making sure that you're using the right timing, if it's 2 or 3 applications a year. So really what I tell people, or really start with as far as a program that you're going to build with StayGuard, is really kind of build that around the experience that you have with Ronstar. Again, if you were making a couple of applications a year, stay on that program. As far as the application timing, the use rate with StayGuard, I like to tell people to start around 250 to 300 pounds. Those are a little bit higher rate, but again, nice consistent control when we're at those application rates, with the expectations of similar control. A lot of times, and even our data will show this, sometimes we can get on all the grasses a little longer control than Ronstar. Other times it's just very comparable. So again, a nice alternative for that. And Jim, how about a couple of comments, or again, over the last couple of years that you've been hearing from customers using this type of philosophy?
Yeah, again, we don't want to oversell this product in the sense of, you hear from some of the basics, the newest product comes out and, oh, use that and only that. And we want to be realistic about this fitting, whether it's warm season or cool season grasses, fitting into a program, and what does it bring to the table. So, with its broad spectrum of both post and pre, that's somewhat unique. The fact that it's not a root inhibitor really increases that safety level, especially on Bermuda grass coming out of dormancy, for example. We've seen some really good results on sod farms, where, you really have to have a pristine crop. And we've gotten some great results. It gives the opportunity in landscape beds to sell an upgraded fertilizer, let's say a programmable 2 or 3 or longer release fertilizer with a pre-emergence. So, and Jason, you might comment on, in landscape beds, there's some cautionary things that you might mention.
Yeah, I'll show that here in a couple of slides. But with that, Jim, I think the instructions, you kind of mentioned this as far as what we usually see and what we're suggesting right now with StayGuard after the application. How should we recommend, irrigation in particular after those applications are made, and or even what really kind of dictates? And really what we find is that soil moisture at application is important with StayGuard. And really we just have kind of 3 scenarios here, 1, 2, and 3. And I'll start with the third, where if you're making applications potentially with StayGuard where you have enough soil moisture and it can be squeezed out of the spreading equipment, or you see the moisture on the tires, what we really say in this, hold off on your StayGuard application. Just wait for that area to dry out a little bit more. Jim was saying it has a lot of activity when things are wet. We know this, it's an aquatic herbicide, right? When things are wet, it's kind of supercharged like he talked about. But on the other circumstances, if you have average soil moisture conditions, or even on the dry, you can make these applications. The only thing we really ask is that you make your kind of standard 2 to 3 turns of the head right after that application. Then either go with a normal irrigation cycle that night, or if things are really dry, maybe at least a 1/4 of an inch that evening to irrigate. And then really after that, in either of these situations, really follow the cart path rule for 24 hours was what we find to be identical between these two. So really, I think that's ideal, where you could limit your traffic, limit your carts for the first day after a StayGuard application, very similar to what you would have with Ronstar. So again, not a whole lot of difference here between the two when it comes to the characteristics that you would, as far as treating after that application. But another situation again that I talked about was in dormant Bermuda grass with StayGuard and how it could actually fit in a really good program. This is what I kind of talk to people about the Cadillac program, right? Maybe coming out with a pre-emergence this time of year, even just like split applications of spectacle early for that POA management, right? Then when things are completely dormant, something like a non-selective Cheetah Pro with SureGuard. And then really that StayGuard has this tremendous fit when turf is back up, it's greening. We know those pre-emergents are starting to run out, that we can come in with in maybe a May or early June application of StayGuard. Again, we're looking at that 250 to 300 pound rate for our goosegrass, spurge, other broadleaf weeds and grasses that you would find then throughout the summer. And then again, even if you were going to do some overseeding that fall, you still could. So a great program that we've seen a lot of people take advantage of is something like this. And then one additional one that you don't see a lot of Ronstar, and we've talked about this, but an application now for pre-emergence POA control, that early activity that you can get on small newly emerged POA. You can see that with StayGuard and then keeping it out over time. Another alternative, if you haven't done anything for POA management, say it gets to be November, December, you've got some POA out there, you want to go out with a post-emergence like a tributolal and in Princeps, say 2 modes of action to clean up what POA you may have, you then can spread either prior to or right after that application with StayGuard to keep it out for several months. So again, a lot of different opportunities here. We see that, and really when we talk about a lot of opportunities, right, that label's pretty wide. And Jim's mentioned this a couple times, but landscape bed uses, I think, is a real opportunity with StayGuard. We've had great success through the years with Broadstar. Some of the things that we see really, again, is it's not a root inhibitor. Plants can be really happy even if the herbicide's been applied right to the edge of these plants. You don't have to worry about that. The other thing is the spectrum of activity that you see with Flumiox. We know this with Broadstar through the years. We see the same thing with StayGuard. But again, especially our winter annuals. So if you were to make an application, say late in the year for winter annuals, such as like in this picture, common groundsel, chickweed, henbit, bittercress, a lot of our winter annuals are weeds that are really sensitive to StayGuard. So again, we can have some really good results. But like Jim was mentioning, this is the type of landscape bed that we really want to focus on with this herbicide when it's on fertilizer. You can go out and you can fertilize this area. There's a lot of established woody perennials. Even if you were to treat the grass area, again, that would be fine in that we have really good tolerance on our turf as well as all these woody ornamental plants. So again, just provides that opportunity to fertilize, to maintain our weed control. And again, some of our real strengths in these settings are those winter annuals that really kind of creep up on people and get pretty distracting. So especially when it comes to springtime and you have all sorts of weeds, it's a great way just to eliminate it. So that use pattern has worked out really well as some of our cool season turf grasses. As Jim mentioned, we did really the same amount of work in cool season as we did the warm season, and we used that same protocol I showed earlier in the presentation. We really got the same results. There's just nothing here, no injury at all. And again, this was a June application at Rutgers to Kentucky bluegrass. So again, we feel very strongly if these warm season or these cool season turf grasses are actively growing, that you can have really good tolerance with StayGuard. And just to show that a little bit more, we did some work at Michigan State looking at even up to 600 pounds applied in April, May, and June. So very high rates. And sometimes, I think a picture just kind of shows it all, but here's our timing one in April, May, and June. And these are our 600-pound rates down here of StayGuard looking just as good as the untreated control, right? So again, kind of what you were talking about, Jim, if you're making these applications more in season or when this turf is already actively growing, we have tremendous results. And this is one that I really love. This was from a field day this summer at Purdue. I got to kind of walk you through just really what we're looking at. You kind of notice the area overall is just kind of this darker green. And the reason being, this was a trial that was actually, the herbicide was only spread once. It was on June 1st, and this was a trial area for yellow nutsedge. Okay, so what we were looking at here is that there was a lot of contamination with a number of different weeds, but this includes bent grass down in this area. You can see all the POA annual kind of throughout this trial area, but our ryegrass is really kind of taken off. So what we see with this application, again, just on June 1st, picture was taken just a little over a month later. But the first thing was that the ryegrass did well. Absolutely no response on the ryegrass. It's thriving. But what we did see was activity on the sedges, just like Dr. McElroy from Auburn talked about, even with a granule on fertilizer, right? We're seeing this reach back activity on sedges. But certainly the crabgrass was controlled really, really well. The bent grass was also does not like this herbicide. It was removed, slowly removed from these treated areas, as well as the poa annua that was in there was also removed. So we see this slow removal of some of these grasses in these treated areas, but our ryegrass, our Kentucky bluegrass, tall fescue, again, can look great. So a lot of opportunities. I think it's very unique in this cool season market. Again, it's a wide germination range for crabgrass. The length of control of StayGuard is not really going to be the necessarily thing that you're really focused on. So like Jim was saying, I think a great way to use it is more of this split application type program where you're using a prodiamine or a pendimethalin early, then coming back with StayGuard. Again, focusing on that summer-long control of grasses, but then sedges and broadleaf weeds as well. So Jim, you want to pick up a little bit on that,
Well,
on what the feedback has
yeah.
been?
One question that's come up when we've done these presentations before is what is we see what the recommended rate range is, and we know that 600 is the max per season under, a double application, but is there a rate response? The question we've had before is there a rate response in terms of longevity or improved performance?
That's a great question. And I'll tell you from my experience, you will, in general, the nice thing about it is that we know the number, right? The max for the year is 600. So you can get there either with two 300s or say three 200-pound applications. What I usually see is more consistent about 2 to 3 weeks longer control at the high rate over the low rate. So if you kind of keep that in mind, you just have to make multiple applications at the low rates, but you can make up to 3 applications a year at the 200-pound rate. So a lot of times I think, Jim, it depends on what you're looking for as far as longevity. And that's why sometimes you'll hear me talk more about the 250 to 300-pound rate, because that's really where your maximum efficacy is going to be. I really don't see in most cases any difference between 250 and 300 as far as the longevity. I think the consistency on some really difficult to control weeds you might be able to tease out, but for the most part you only really see a major difference, and it's about 2 to 3 weeks from 2 to 300 pounds.
Yeah, and the other question that we've gotten before, I think for the group, it would be interesting for them, is you would think, a lot of people tend to think, hey, a pre-emergent product going out with a mini is going to give me better control, just coverage, more particles, and so forth. You want to speak to what your research has found in terms of using a mini versus a standard particle?
Yeah, Jim, I think we went into this project with a very open mind, right? And kind of anticipated that would probably be the case, right? More particles, mini particles, you're going to probably get better control. And we just consistently have not seen that with this product. There's been virtually no exceptions to that. I think the one thing that we do by having a use rate of 2 to 300 pounds, we get enough particle distribution that even with a 220 size granule, that really is kind of optimum. And the one thing to kind of keep in mind that's the same size granule we use even for Broadstar. But Broadstar is twice the concentration, so its use rate's only 150 pounds. So it definitely does not have as good a spread as StayGuard on a side-by-side basis. So I just feel like that's kind of where the optimal size is somewhere around a 220.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, because we don't want people thinking, that, hey, let's go with a mini, you're going to get better control, because you're adding significant cost with a mini size granule. So I think that's an important point.
And I think the only thing I feel too is you increase that risk of potential sticking to the leaf. We haven't consistently seen that, but I still feel like in the back of my mind, you are increasing that risk, especially if you're going to make applications around some really wide leaf, say ornamentals, right? Landscape beds, if you're getting a little on those. To me, a real small, lighter particle is going to have a better opportunity to stick onto that foliage than something a little larger. So The last slide I have before we kind of roll into the questions and answer, if somebody does have some questions, I feel like, and hopefully everyone does after they've seen this today, is that StayGuard is a great new tool for weed control. It's very, very unique. I say that every time that I talk about StayGuard. There isn't exactly a product like it on the market. To me, you can take Ronstar. We can really do everything Ronstar does, but guess what? It does a whole lot more. So that means learning it, right? So just make sure you agronomically know what you're doing and feel comfortable with it. If I always tell people, if they have questions, feel free to reach out. Just don't assume this is going to be like a Dimension, or it's going to be like a Prodiamine or a Spectacle. It's very different than anything out there today. But you can see it can also do a lot that other products struggle with. So that's kind of what I have today, Jim.
Yeah. Thank you, Jason. That was great. I think we've learned a lot over the couple of years that we've been making these presentations. Again, we still have an opportunity to take questions, or if you have other questions that you want to share with your Nufarm representative that you know more personally, please feel free to do that. Again, this is going to be widely available. We've just recently expanded distribution in terms of what formulators are working with the product. In the South, Harold's has had extensive work, and experience with this product. Howard's and Regal as well. We've just added on Spring Valley, who now have locations in Florida as well as Texas. We've got Fertilizer Technologies in the north. Cinetech is in the process of thinking about working with this product and getting a contract for it. Andre and Sons as well in the north. So I think it's widely available, and we would encourage you to work with your formulators, try some, take a look at those expectations. Feel free to contact me or Jason. You can get our contact information through your Nufarm representative. And other than that, I think we covered pretty much most of it. Jason, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, there was one really good question here, Jim, and I don't think I've actually been asked this in our presentation, but does StayGuard degrade by a high microbial activity? And the answer is that yes. I mean, it is certainly degraded by microbial activity. The nice thing about it is what we've seen with these microbes through the years with flumioxazin is that it's a different microbe than, say, maybe you're starting to think is, hey, my DNAs, maybe the prodiamine and pendimethalin, you're not seeing the longevity, and some of that is also microbial degradation, as well as some other reasons. But what we find is that it's a different set of microbes that are breaking this down. So I always say some of the longest residual control that you'll get with StayGuard is the very first time it was ever used on, say, that property. If it's a golf course or if it's a lawn setting, whatever it is, an athletic field, if you've never used flumioxazin on that field or that area, the longevity is again kind of maximized right then. So again, what does this all mean to me as a weed scientist? It's a great tool to rotate chemistries, right? You'll get great activity out of it, and then to me, then when you go back to your other chemistries, you'll even improve the length of control there. So I feel like that's probably one of the most underutilized aspects of this, is that I think it's just as a weed control program an excellent tool.
Yeah, good, very good point. And with that, I guess we'll bring it to a close. And I just want to thank everybody for taking the time late on a Friday. I know, early order season is pretty intense. So everybody have a great weekend, and thank you for taking the time. Thank you very much.
Hey, Jim, just 1 minute. There's one more question in the chat.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you guys saw that one.
I don't see it in Q&A.
It says, great presentation. Is it available to us to help or to use to help sell customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So the intent is to have a kind of maybe a pared down version of the same presentation that you've seen today. We've been working on it and polishing it and trying to make it more concise all along. It's almost, I think, good to go as it is. But, every distributor wants to have, and distributor salesperson wants to have a lot of tools in the toolbox. So this is something, or a version of what you've seen today is something that we're going to make available to anybody that asks for it. Just contact your Nufarm representative. and you can customize it. Obviously, you don't get an hour with every customer, but you can, what those key slides are that you think might be a hot button with that customer willing to try something new. So again, another tool for the toolbox that we plan on distributing widely. Okay. Any other questions? Great. Well, with that, thank you so much, everybody, for taking the time, and hopefully you'll get a chance to try StayGuard. Thanks, everybody.